Greetings to heathens and apologists alike from Revelation Be Damned, and thank you for joining me in my harsh assessment of the concept of free will, which has been so kindly given to us by an acclaimed Divine Father in which we should forever be indebted. I have entitled this Free Will, the Unwritten Commandment, because I believe it's just that. Please offer your opinions via the comments box or at www.revelationbedamned@outlook.com, and please be sure to tell me what I have missed out or what injustice, lies or utter fodder I am responsible for. To quote the late and great Christopher Hitchens, we have free will because the boss gave it to us, which is a wonderful analogy for the obvious point in which such a notion suggests. It's quite a nonsensical statement to claim that freedom of thought was given to us. As if, without the Lord's kind gift, we would be void of freedom of thought, existing as followers like moths to a light bulb. But then the question must be asked, if there was no God to give us free will, then who exactly would we be taking our orders from? If the very source of such a gift was not there to give us the ability to think freely, then God's non-existence would leave no deity in which to blindly follow. In which case, free will would not exist in either scenario. It's fairly safe to say that the aptly named sheep of Christianity are guilty of contradiction by seeking God's guidelines, just as they have been told, thus falling short of the contradictory free will we have been told is available, with the added further confusion of it having been given to us against our will. It would seem that one act of freedom or obedience will always cancel out the other, leaving God's decision-making in much need of improvement. The concept of self-awareness is something humans are lucky enough to have achieved, through the evolutionary process deriving from primate relationships, leading to families and friendships. We see across the animal kingdom kindness, affection, and what even appears to be love. But it's safe to say these creatures cannot contemplate as to why they feel these things, or make an assessment on themselves or their existence. Judging by the fact we can see similar emotional characteristics in animals, it's safe to say the only thing special about us is our brain. In many cases we are weaker, slower, and often less equipped for our planet than many creatures that we live beside. But our brain has become what to a gorilla would be brute strength, or to a bald eagle would be powerful wings. Our brains have evolved to the point of discovering the meaning of depression, self-loathing, social grouping, discrimination, biased views, and all other issues of today's kind that we all grapple with. Our problems have evolved from working together via hand signals and grunts, which progressed into speech, which opened a door of cataclysmic madness in which we shall never recover. The animalistic fear of pain, death, or in some species rejection or isolation, has clearly been left with us in an insecure way, and our newfound intelligence can also be our largest hindrance. The very fact people suffer from hysteria or mental illness, or even just naive attempts to explain their existence by conjuring images in which they could not prove, is for me a clear sign of our primitive lack of intelligence. A fear of how small we are in comparison with the wider population in which we live. Our worth in terms of self-importance, and the coping with a violent universe and its harsh realities, such as lack of answers, its unexplainable cruelty, its beauty, and of course the finest excuse to seek false promises, the fear we all face of impending death. If this was not the case, a person in true belief of God's divinity would never fear death for themselves or their family. They would not need to protect themselves or their family because they'll be seeing them shortly in the kingdom of heaven. But we know that isn't the case, unless of course your religion is of another kind that gives you full permission to exercise such godly acts of kindness. From the lowly priest to Pope Looney, they seem to value their life and are in no hurry to take the risk of being wrong. For an all-knowing creator to offer free will when he has already laid out his plans, in which he knows what will happen and what will take place at what time and how, I'm not impressed with the notion that I should be patronised as to believe my path is laid out, but I have no choice in its outcome. Free will, it would seem, is a useless tool to have if our free will is predetermined by its very source. In which case, praying itself would not only seem fruitless and downright rude to disturb the almighty invader of privacy in the sky, but also selfish in the thought that your trivial issue is worth the time of a divine creator whose plans are so amazing they cannot be understood. Yet you would like him to change them all for your current prayer, in which deals with your own personal situation. I smell the notion of selfish requests based on being told the super mathematical octo-banana in the sky has time for you because it's the mind's weak way of seeking comfort when the going gets tough. Or that fact cannot be an option in the face of blissful wish-making backed by serpents in cloth. Surely an almighty God with an omnipotent plan should be treated as too powerful to bother. If every fruitcake with the ability to pray got their way, it's safe to say the world would be severely diminishing by its value of the God they seem to love so much. Is the suggestion now that God's plan was insufficient and you're asking for a better deal? Either way, I can save you the trouble and let you know there's no fear of him helping whether he exists or not. Because if he did, he certainly doesn't care to prove his existence, so he either does not know how to, or he does not exist. And I'm confident I have made my choice wisely. Throughout the ages, people have been born into or conscripted into a life of servitude, imprisonment or slavery. People have been killed despite their religious values, and children die in the millions each year before having had a chance to exercise any type of free thinking or act of kindness or evil. It would be nice to know if the Christians who were fed to lions freely chose to be shredded like condemned sausage meat. I'll give their memory the respect in assuming they did not. Each of these lives that have been lost is undermined by the notion free will is entitled to each of us as part of our destiny, when one man's decision can strip the freedom of many at a time. The notion that heaven will reward those who have faced injustice does not stand up to the fact those who did not face horrific ordeals will see heaven's glory as well, having not had to endure rape, slavery or torture. If it is the case that heaven will right all wrongs, then as I said before, there is no need to protect one's family, because eternal justice will be served, and losing a loved one should cause no pain, but in fact, like in some cases in Islam, cause genuine jealousy. But I am sure I'd lay a wager that not one man of God will risk their child's safety at any time, despite knowing of heaven's treasures. It's also incredibly difficult to understand the idea of being given free will with a list of rules as to how to live one's life. From how to treat servants or slave, when to rest, how and who you can sleep with, how to punish or label those who break the rules, and many more commands that lay waste to the idea of making decisions for oneself. Just to point towards the Ten Commandments alone, surely the very term commandment would ring some alarm bells concerning the pleasant illusion of choice. The claim is we were made in God's image, which I would usually argue for the opposite to be the case, seeing as how God's character seems familiar to people and their issues. But for the sake of argument, let's imagine God gave us this freedom and we were made in God's image with self-awareness just like him. That he created us with the ability to question our minds and meaning, whilst in the knowledge he was not created, but somehow always was. That he would offer no sign of his supremacy, apart from to people of Palestine long ago, many, many years after humans had already walked the earth, not knowing they would face hell for having been born too early. too early for the message that would have otherwise saved them. I'm guessing it must be an annoyance to face an eternity of hellfire having been born 1,000 years before Jesus. I must admit, it would certainly irritate me at some point in time, seeing as you're stuck there throughout eternity. It's probably going to get on your wick at some point. But if we are made in God's image, and God has told us to just believe he has no creator, why would he expect us not to believe we have no creator, just as he claims? Maybe God is but a human of another galaxy where every person on that planet controls or sickly watches billions of its followers on different planets. These mega god alien humanoids are themselves atheists in that belief that they are the only creators in existence, when it is a very atheist claim to make. A claim such as we do not have a creator, just like we do not have a spiritual outlet to seek forgiveness without having to face those we wronged. Freedom of thought is an important thing, and if you were to tell someone who is mute, deaf, or blind, in whatever method you could, that we're all made the same and given equal opportunities, I think that person would consider your claim not only offensive, but narcissistic and selfish. The spiritual take pride in ignoring the fact that biological luck is a huge factor in your ability to claim God's message with the mouth he did not evenly give to others. The further claim that the Lord is punishing people or parents is also, in my opinion, a cheap and disgusting point to make, as if to assume a righteous sense of entitlement from making the right choices in faith. You did not know of divine will when you was born. So it's safe to say, if you had been born with a damaged mind and never got to make such claims, the idea of equality in God's eyes would seem to you as non-existent as his miracles or uses. For me, free will is particularly important and is an important subject overall, because it's a non-believer's wish that those afflicted by religious soothsaying are genuinely using freedom of thought and weigh up the odds and find a wonderful quest for information based on the realization we do not know all the answers, as opposed to revelation and assuming that we do. It may dawn on someone actually exercising their own mind, as opposed to the dogma of others, that the probability of the universe having been made by a sole creator is farcical and damaging to society. The greater of all things complex, the cataclysmic maker of everything complex and awe-inspiring, gave his feeble messages to an illiterate few people from a privative year in history, is actually closer to insanity than it is to truth. I'm confident many of you out there would love to argue against my point or fly and kick me at running speed, but I'm afraid all I can offer is an email address in which you can hail abuse or interesting points in which I may have missed or why you feel I was unfair. Leave your divine comments in the comments box or hail me your blessed emails at www.revelationbedamned@outlook.com. If God is watching with interest and his children are tearing each other apart under his watchful gaze, I'm sure it'll be from some sort of Death Star or Imperial ship. No supervillain or fictional character could ever amount to the death toll and inventive confusion the giver of free will has offered. On that note, I shall take my leave and hope something I said will either assist your arguments against the nonsensical or assist in breaking your thought pattern out of its restrictive dungeon. Thank you again for your time, and remember, the next time you're told something on blind faith, instead to think for yourself.